Hello and welcome to another Niggle Picks video. My name's Nigel. This time you find me in a very snowy, very cold Heptonstall. This time we're doing a walk guided by a pamphlet, booklet that was created in the 1970s and then was updated through the years to the 2000s. I'm using one of the latter versions. There's 29 visits to different places, including the grave just behind me to the left of David Hartley, who was a Crag coin, and the local cloth hall, which predates the one at Halifax, the Peace Hall. Anyway, let's get on. This is point number 1 on the history trail, and this is Longfield House. The house was built between 1730 and 1740. The front is arranged symmetrically on classic lines. This was a marked departure from the local architectural tradition. Compare all the other buildings here. A little further down the road on Towngate, the smaller building to the right was once the village bakehouse. That building there. We've gone past step number 2. There was actually just the guide map. This one is place number 3, which is the old cooperative building. This was originally built in 1866 by the then newly formed Heptonstall Cooperative Society. In 1864 the society bought 7 old cottages which stood at the site of Clark Hill and Great Wells. 2 of these houses, the Mechanics Institute, of which is more is revealed at point 16. 6 of these cottages were demolished and the present building was erected on the site. 1 cottage remains tucked away in the fold to the left of the co-op. Try and get a picture of that for you. Heptonstall Cooperative Society flourished during the 19th century and once owned the farm on which the car park now stands, and also owned the row of tall houses above it, Cooperative Terrace. The society went into liquidation in 1967 and the property was sold. Since then it has had many changes. Stag Cottage is probably the oldest surviving house in Heptonstall. Built in around 1580, the cottage has typically 16th century windows and elaborated arched lintels. Its name came from its proximity to the former Stag Inn. The cottage, then known as the Elizabethan Cottage, was part of the co-op complex until 1967. Looking here on Towngate, you can see the 2 remaining inns. This one is the Cross. If we pan up, there is the Lion. Beautiful day. In the early 19th century, Heptonstall possessed 5 inns, additional to beer shops, all of which were situated here on Towngate. 5 public houses may seem quite a lot for a small village like Heptonstall, but it was once a very large settlement and important for local traders and merchants. The Stag Inn, now 2 cottages, lies on the right, which is at the bottom just there, I think, in Northgate area, just behind Northgate. The Cross Inn was originally known as the Stocks Inn. That's the cross there. Almost certainly Australia stood on this site for a very long time. The present frontage is Victorian. but the rest of the structure is much older. Formerly the inn also occupied the house to the left and has now expanded along Northgate into New House, which we'll show you in point number 23. An early owner of the Cos was one of the first governors of the grammar school, which we will be visiting shortly. I'm sorry if I'm stammering, but it is very cold out here. Just here, which is below the lion, sorry I'm having to read from the booklet, is Swan Fold. The 3 cottages in the fold facing downtown gate were once the Swan Inn, which let's go over and have a look, see if we can see what they are. Somewhere in there, oh, there we can, yeah, Swan Fold on the top. So there, the 3 cottages were the Swan Inn. Heptonstall Cloth Hall, or as it was also known, Blackwood Hall, after the Great Cloth Market in London, was established in 1545. Deeds for the 2 cottages above would suggest that the original Cloth Hall was where they are. The building now known as the Cloth Hall was added as an annex later when trade had increased and was beyond the capacity of the original hall. Trade at the Cloth Hall began to flounder when the Peace Hall was opened in Halifax in 1777. The old grammar school, now Heptonstall Museum, was originally endowed in 1642 by the legacy of the Reverend Charles Greenwood. The school was rebuilt in 1771 and continued as a school until 1889. In 1898 the Yorkshire Penny Bank took over the premises and, unusually for the time, was careful to preserve the character of the old school. The bank closed its doors for the last time in 1954 and the building was handed to Hebden Rural District Council. The fact that there are 2 churches in one churchyard is an unusual feature. Only a handful of other churchyards in Britain can claim a similar peculiarity, one being that of Westminster Abbey. The graveyard that surrounds the 2 churches is reputed to hold the remains of over 100,000 bodies, a figure which is impossible to confirm, although the burial registers from 1594 to 1812 account for over 25,000. An indication of its intensive use is the interesting note that many gravestones have been used more than once. One set of inscriptions are face down to the soil. People have been buried in the churchyard since the 1200s, but there are only 2 that are possibly medieval, and these must date from before 1500. They only have crosses on them and no dates. David Hartley was the leader of the Crag Coiners, a gang based mainly in the Crag Vale area, who were notorious in the 18th century for robbery, coin clipping and forgery of the coin of the realm. Whilst up to their ne'er-doings, the gang were also involved in the murder of Customs and Excise officer William Dayton, and for his part in some of the acts, Hartley was tried at York Assizes, found guilty and was hanged in York on May the 1st, 1770. Chantry House has had a very checkered history. At one time it was a charnel house, which is a place where human bones are stored. During its last conversion, many bones were found under the floors and under window ledges. At one time, the upper story was made into one room and used by the local scout troop. Later the roof collapsed and the house lay derelict for some years before being transformed into its present state by a far-sighted owner who built in traditional style, when most people were knocking down and modernising. The foundation stone for the new church was laid on the 15th of May 1850. The completed church was consecrated on the 26th of October 1854 by the Bishop of Ripon, the Right Reverend Dr. Longley, and dedicated to St Thomas the Apostle. The building is an excellent example of Victorian Gothic architecture and cost £6,666 and was designed by Healy and Mallinson of Bradford. The font in the new church is the original 13th century font that was used in the old church across the way. At the tower end of the church is a beautiful and historic copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. On the opposite side of the new church is the new graveyard. The land for this new burial ground was donated by Gamaliel Sutcliffe in 1911. As a result of this gift, the old burial ground around the two churches was closed in 1915. The grave of American poet Sylvia Plath can be found in this graveyard. She often accompanied her husband Ted Hughes to visit his parents who lived in Heptonstall. This is the site of the cockpit, a place for the now illegal sport of cockfighting, believed to have been owned by one of the local nearby hostelries. This building originates from the 18th century, but its development as an institution did not come until 1868, when it moved from its previous location where the old co-op now stands. That's point 4 on the walk. The object of the society which met within was, to quote its rule book, the instruction and improvement of all its members. Party politics and theology played no part in the work of the institution. Mechanics institutes were a part of life in Victorian industrial towns. They were similar to our adult education centres, although they were invariably just for men, and much of the teaching was carried out on a voluntary basis. In medieval times, this was the topmost extent of the village. The name of the main street even changes here from Towngate behind us to Smithwell Lane in front. As can be seen in the old picture, there was a water pump here. The guide says that there were hand-loom weavers' cottages on Silver Street, dated from around 1800. But the cottages that can be seen here either side of Smithwell Lane are identical in design to those on Silver Street, so must also be hand-loom weavers' cottages. The last weaver in Heptonstall and one of the last in the Pennines, John Sutcliffe, lived on Silver Street. He passed away in 1902. This is the one remaining pump of 4 that were in the village. This one dates from 1891, and in times of drought the pump would be padlocked for a short time, and residents would leave their jugs upside down in a line with their initials on the bottom until the pump was unlocked again. Mystery surrounds the name of this building. The Star Chamber was actually a law court in London. It lasted for 300 years until 1641 and dealt with public misdemeanours and state offences. Some Heptonstall people were taken to that court in the 16th century, and it is believed that this building is connected with that trial. This building dates from around 1700 and, until the Wesleyan chapel was built, the middle part was used for meetings. It is believed that John Wesley preached here. The building's frontage has changed, but beams inside are original. The ornate stone on New House is inscribed 1736 with the initials of the builders, H.E.F., Henry and Elizabeth Foster. It was thought to be a Quaker house, and this was believed by the Quakers of Washington, D.C. in the USA, when in 1970 they held a huge spring fair with copies of these figures 12 foot high placed alongside the main highways into the city. The lintel of the arch bears the initials JB and a date of 1578. The fine house beyond is Whitehall Farmhouse, the home of the family of James Bentley. Bentley's farm was an earlier name of the farm. Locally, the farm was known as the Great House on Northgate until it was later renamed Whitehall. The foundation stone for the chapel was laid by the famous preacher John Wesley. The building was completed in 1764 and was designed to Wesley's specifications. The original chapel was a symmetrical building, but in 1802, because of rising numbers, they decided to stretch the building. They knocked down the northern end of the building and extended to create the building we see now. At the same time, a raised pulpit and singing pew were added. The alteration was cleverly done, but it left the society heavily in debt. Nevertheless, in 1804 they were able to build a minister's house nearby on Northgate. In times past, when livestock strayed from their owner's land, they would be impounded here in the pinfold until their owners paid a fine for their return. The pinfold was controlled by the local constable, but was looked after by a person called the pinder. Well, we're nearly at the end of the Heptonstall history trail now, just 2 more places to visit. So if you've liked this video, please don't forget to click the thumbs up, and if you've really liked it, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, but it means a heck of a lot to me. Many, many thanks. This well was one of several in the area, but was very rarely used for drinking water as it was quite often contaminated. In 1834, 51 cases of typhus were caused by polluted water, of which 8 of the people died.